You know exactly what you should be doing with your money. You've known for a while now, maybe for years. Save more, spend less, open that investment account, have that conversation with your partner or with your boss. Look at the statement sitting in your inbox that you've been avoiding for weeks. You know what you need to do, but you're still not doing it. Today, we're going to talk about why. And I promise you the answer is not what you think it is. What if financial freedom was actually within reach for regular, everyday people like you and me? I'm Tammy Kayata, certified financial planner professional and your new favorite truth teller. I spent 15 years helping over 6,000 people transform their financial lives at a Fortune 100 company. I know exactly what works, I know what the industry won't say, and now I'm finally free to tell you all of it. No fluff, no jargon, no watered down advice, just real, unfiltered strategies for building genuine wealth and living life completely on your own terms. Welcome to Off the Record, where ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. Let's get into it. I have a feeling today's episode is going to have a little something to piss just about everybody off, and honestly, I'm kind of okay with that. Because today we are talking about mindset and manifestation, and more specifically, the role that they play in your financial life. And I have never, not once, seen this topic come up in a room where everyone just nodded along and agreed. It simply doesn't happen. People have big feelings about this topic, strong opinions, and they are all over the place. But before I get into the debate, I want to tell you a story because I think it's going to stay with you. And I think by the end of this episode, you are going to understand exactly why I am starting here with this topic. Early in my consulting career, I met with a woman who stopped me in my tracks. She was ex-military, sharp, polished, clearly someone who commanded a room. At the time that I met her, she was the head of a research department at one of the most well-known institutions in the world, a very powerful position. When she walked into my office, she was confident, well-spoken, completely put together. And then we shut the door, we sat down, we opened up our finances. And I watched her physically change in front of me, transform into a completely different person. Her posture caved in, her voice got quiet and shaky. She started to sweat. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you okay? Are you actually ill? So I checked in with her and she looked at me and said, no, physically I'm okay. I'm not sick. But I don't know why. Whenever I talk about my finances, I just start to feel awful. Anxiety so bad that her stomach hurt and all she wanted to do was get up and run out of the room. Now here's the part that really got me. Her finances were fine. She wasn't buried in debt. She had a good income. She was saving reasonably well. She was investing a decent amount. Maybe her investments were quite a bit more conservative than they should be, but honestly, all we needed to do was tighten up her plan in a few areas. There was no bad news, and I told her that. And she said, I know, it doesn't matter. I just always feel this way when it comes to money. So I asked her if I could spend our time together a little bit differently than a normal financial consulting session. Just asked her if I could talk about her childhood. She said yes, and what she shared with me broke my heart. She had grown up in a home with a lot of domestic violence, and almost every incident had started with a conversation about money. Her young brain, that little child absorbing everything around her, unable to understand context or nuance, just feeling the terror of what happened in that house, had made a very logical connection. Money conversations equal danger. Danger equals fear, and fear equals run. And her amygdala, her brain's threat detection system, had been faithfully honoring that connection ever since. So decades later, in a completely safe environment with a woman who was by every objective measure successful, competent, and financially stable, none of that mattered. Because the program running underneath all of it said money is not safe. That was the first time she had ever heard an explanation for why she felt the way she did around money. And something shifted inside of her. She began a journey to understand her own mindset, identify those old beliefs, and slowly, deliberately rewire them. Shifting from avoidance to curiosity. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but a few years into our relationship, she was an entirely different person walking into those meetings. She even joined an investment club where she attended monthly meetings purely to talk about money. She was building wealth in ways she had never imagined possible for herself. Now, she didn't get a raise and earn more money. She didn't work harder. She shifted her mindset. And she built a life that at one point was completely out of reach. She manifested that life. Now, her story is an extreme example. Her childhood experiences clearly shaped the decision she made later in life. Now, you might not have anything as dramatic in your background, or maybe you do, but the outcome can be surprisingly similar. Your money mindset plays a powerful role in how you show up financially, what you believe is possible, the risks that you take or avoid, and ultimately whether you turn your goals into reality. And we're not talking about magic or woo-woo thinking here. We're talking about how your brain actually works. The patterns, beliefs, and behaviors rooted in neuroscience that quietly drive your results. That's what we're diving into today. So what do we actually mean when we say mindset and manifestation? Because I think a lot of the arguing about these topics happens because people aren't even defining them the same way. So let's kind of set a standard here. Starting with mindset. Mindset is simply the lens through which you see the world. It's largely formed subconsciously, and it quietly shapes how you interpret situations, make decisions, and take action. Most of us have heard of this in one of two frameworks. The first comes from Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford. She's a psychologist there and author of Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. She introduced the idea of fixed versus growth mindset. A fixed mindset assumes your abilities are essentially set. You are limited by what you were born with, and there is only so much room to grow. A growth mindset believes your abilities can be developed, that with effort, learning, and persistence, you can expand what you are capable of and create entirely new outcomes. Now, the second framework comes from Dr. Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Scarcity versus Abundance. A scarcity mindset sees the world as having limited resources, where success feels like a competition, and the focus is on protecting what you have. An abundance mindset operates from the belief that there is enough opportunity, growth, and success to go around for everybody, shifting the focus from competition to expansion. Most of us fall somewhere on a spectrum between those extremes, and where you land has a profound impact on how you show up in your financial life, and ultimately what you believe is possible for you. Now, manifestation. This tends to be where people get really worked up. Some will tell you manifestation is all about energy, using your frequency to call out to the universe and draw to you everything that you desire. And if that framing genuinely resonates with you and it's working for you, I am not here to take it away. I mean that. But that is not how I think about it. And I want to offer you a definition that I think may be useful, especially if you're someone who is already rolling your eyes about this topic. For me, manifestation is the process of turning your internal world, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your expectations, into external results through aligned action, momentum, and attention. You're not sitting on your couch wishing for wealth and waiting for it to appear. You are becoming the kind of person who sees opportunity, believes it is possible, and takes the actions that make it real. Here's the simple framework I want you to hold on to, because we're going to come back to it throughout this entire episode. Thoughts lead to beliefs. Beliefs drive actions. Actions create results. That is the whole chain. And here's the critical piece. If your thoughts and beliefs do not change, your actions will not either. And if your actions do not change, neither will your results, no matter how many strategies you learn. Here's the part I want to make absolutely crystal clear, because this is where mindset and manifestation stop being abstract ideas and start becoming something real that you can actually use. This chain, thoughts, beliefs, actions, results, is not just a nice framework. It's literally how your brain is wired to operate. Your brain is constantly trying to be efficient. It takes what you think repeatedly, turns it into a belief to save energy, and then automates your behavior around that belief so you don't have to consciously think about it every single time. That's what a neural pathway is. And manifestation, the way I use that word, is simply this. You are intentionally choosing what pathways in your brain get strengthened. You're deciding on purpose which thoughts get repeated, which beliefs get reinforced, and therefore which actions become automatic. So when people say you create your reality, what they are actually describing is this. Your brain is filtering, predicting, and driving your behavior based on what it has learned to believe is true. That's it. Not magic, not luck, not coincidence, programming. What you constantly think about influences what you believe. What you believe is possible determines what you're willing to try. What you feel in your body impacts your motivation, your confidence, and your follow-through. And all of that drives your behavior, which ultimately creates your results. Manifestation is the intentional process of shifting that chain so you can create different outcomes on purpose, not by accident, not by luck, with intention, on purpose. Think about my client. Her thoughts about money, formed in terror before she was old enough to understand what was actually happening, had become beliefs so deep she could not even sit in a room with a financial statement without her body going into panic mode. Those beliefs drove her actions, specifically avoidance, complete, total, physical avoidance. And those actions created her results, a financial life that was functional but not growing, managed by anxiety rather than intention. When she changed the thoughts and beliefs, everything else followed. The actions changed, the results changed. That's not magic. That's the cycle working exactly as it's designed to. Now, let me lay out the landscape of where people stand on all of this, because I think you're going to recognize these groups. On the one end, you have the hardcore, just work harder crowd. A lot of them are financial advisors, by the way. They think mindset and manifestation are complete nonsense, not worth the conversation. Their philosophy is simple. If you are struggling financially, make more money. Get a side hustle, buy real estate, start a business. Stop looking for a magical mental shortcut and just put in the work. These are practical, action-oriented people who are deeply skeptical of anything that sounds remotely soft or touchy-feely. And if you cannot put it on a spreadsheet, they don't want to talk about it. It doesn't count. On the complete opposite end, you have what the first group would call the woo-woo crowd. These are the people who believe the only thing that truly matters when it comes to wealth creation is your frequency, your energy, the subconscious vibration you are putting out into the universe without even realizing it. No strategy, no hustle, no financial plan will ever work, they say, until you address that energy first. These are your quantum physics people, your crystal people, your deep introspection, shadow work, law of attraction people. And they are every bit as passionate about their position as the first group. And then there's everybody else, which, let's be honest, is most of us, somewhere in the middle. Not totally sure what to believe. Maybe a little bit curious about different things, maybe a little bit skeptical, and just trying to figure out what actually works. So here's where I stand, and I want to be really transparent about this because I think it matters. I am not a woo-woo person. For a long time, I was much closer to the first group than the second. I was trained in hard data, financial modeling, market analysis, give me the numbers and let's talk strategy. I rolled my eyes at manifestation. I thought vision boards were cute, but not particularly useful. I was pretty convinced that mindset work was mostly just a way for people to feel productive without actually doing anything. Then I started digging into the neuroscience behind it, and everything changed for me. I say that specifically for the people who are already rolling their eyes, because trust me, I get it. I still hear some things people suggest and I cringe a little on the inside. But here's what I realized. A lot of what gets labeled as woo-woo is actually just how your brain works. It has a scientific explanation, and once I understood that, I couldn't unsee it. It became completely logical to me, and I have watched it change lives, including my own, including that woman who walked into my office unable to breathe through a conversation about money and who walked out years later leading an investment club. That being said, you're not going to hear me tell you which crystals to buy, ask you to visualize destroying an egg full of your limiting beliefs, or have you standing in your kitchen chanting to the universe about how ready you are to receive abundance. That's just not my lane. And honestly, if I tried, you would see right through it in about 30 seconds. If quantum physics and energy frequencies work for you, genuinely work, please don't let me talk you out of it. I mean it sincerely. My only goal is to help you succeed, and I do not care what path gets you there. But what I want to share today is the version of mindset and manifestation that is grounded in neuroscience. The version that I have seen work over and over again in real people's financial lives. The version that I believe every single one of you can apply regardless of where you fall on that spectrum. You might not think I go deep enough. You might think I shouldn't be talking about this at all. That's okay. All I ask is that you keep an open mind and follow the logic of what I am about to walk you through. Because I think you are going to see yourself in some of this. And that's exactly where the real work begins. Before we get into the strategy, we need to talk about your brain. Really talk about it. Because once you understand what's actually happening up there, so much of your financial behavior is going to start making complete sense. And more importantly, you're going to start seeing exactly what you can do about it. Your brain is extraordinarily complex, and I am not qualified to explain everything that goes on up there, but I want to walk you through 4 key concepts that are going to make everything that we've been talking about click into place. 1, your brain's primary focus is survival. Not happiness, not wealth, survival. And that matters more to your financial life than you probably realize. 2, the overwhelming majority of your daily decisions and actions are driven by habit, not conscious thought. That includes your spending, your saving, your avoidance of important financial conversations. Most of it happens on autopilot. 3, your brain is incredibly efficient because it has to be. But that efficiency might actually be working against you when it comes to money. And 4, and this is good news, you can train your brain. You've been doing it since birth, and you can absolutely do it as an adult on purpose. Let's go deeper. Your brain starts writing its story before you can even talk. The most powerful programming your brain will ever receive happens before you were old enough to consciously process any of it. Think about that. Before you could read, before you could reason, before you had the words to describe what was happening around you. Your brain was already working, already absorbing everything, filing it away, building a picture of what the world is, how it works, and most importantly, what is safe and what is dangerous. Author Jen Sincero uses a wonderful concept she calls the little prince. The idea that inside all of us lives a small child, probably around 10 years old, who absorbed the world the way only children can. Not analyzing, not filtering, not understanding context, just taking it all in, the emotions, the tone, the atmosphere, the energy in a room, making connections and storing them as fact, as universal truth, never questioning it, built without any context and used as the framework for decisions for the rest of your life. Think about what that means for money. You did not learn about money from a textbook when you were 2 years old. You learned about money from the feeling in the room when it came up. From the tension in your parents' voices when the bills arrived, from watching one parent shut down when the other brought up finances, from the look on someone's face when they said, "We can't afford that," from the silence, because some families just didn't talk about money at all, and that silence told its own story. My client, the one I told you about at the start of today's episode, learned about money from the sound of her mother being hurt. Every single time a money conversation started, her little prince did not understand domestic violence, did not understand financial stress or adult relationships or any of the complexity underneath what was happening. She just felt the terror, and she filed it away. Money equals danger, and that became her truth. Your child brain took everything around you in and did exactly what it's designed to do. It drew conclusions, built rules, decided based on the available evidence what money means, what it does to people, and whether it is something safe to pursue or something to be afraid of. And those conclusions became the foundation for your neural pathways, literal physical pathways in your brain. Think of it like water running over a rock. The first time it makes a small mark, but the more it runs, the deeper the groove becomes. The more a thought or belief gets reinforced, the stronger that pathway gets, until eventually it does not feel like a belief at all. It just feels like the truth, like the way things are, like you. The child who heard parents fight every time money came up did not consciously decide, "I will now believe that talking about money is dangerous." No, they just absorbed it over and over again. And their brain quietly built a neural pathway that money conversations equals conflict and conflict equals danger. Danger means avoid. And 30 years later, that same person sits across from their spouse or their financial advisor or their bank statement and feel a wave of anxiety they cannot explain. Because the pathway is still there. It's still running, still protecting them from a danger that may no longer even exist. That's the power of early programming, and understanding it is the very first step to changing it. Your brain's number one job is not to make you rich. It's to keep you alive. So now I want to introduce you to the part of your brain that was running the show for my client every time she sat down to talk about money. It's called the amygdala. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain, and it has one primary job: survival. It's your brain's security system. It's alarm. It's round-the-clock threat detection center. And what it says goes every single time, no exceptions. And here's how it works. Every second of every day, your brain is taking in an almost incomprehensible amount of sensory information. Everything you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. You are literally bombarded with stimulation nonstop, far more than your brain can possibly give equal attention to. So your amygdala is scanning all of it constantly, comparing it against everything you stored in your memory and asking one very simple question: is this a threat? When it decides the answer is yes, and this happens in milliseconds, faster than conscious thought, it triggers an emotional response: stress, fear, anxiety, anger, shame. And it kicks off one of those pre-built neural pathways, sending you straight down a road to a predetermined response before your rational mind even knows what happened. And here's the part that matters the most for our conversation today. When the amygdala fires, it overrides your prefrontal cortex. Now remember, your prefrontal cortex is your thinking brain, your rational, logical, long-term planning, I know what is best for me brain. The part that knows you should check your account balance, the part that understands compound interest, the part that built a really solid budget last Sunday afternoon when you were feeling motivated and clear. When the amygdala decides that there's a threat, real or perceived, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. You literally cannot think the way you normally would. And all that knowledge, all that logic, all that rational understanding of what you should do is just not available to you in the same way. Because your brain is shifted into survival mode. And in survival mode, the goal is not to optimize your retirement contributions. The goal is to get safe. That's exactly what was happening to my client. She was not being dramatic. She was not weak or irrational. Her amygdala had a decades-old instruction: money conversations are life-threatening. And it was executing that instruction perfectly every single time. The moment she sat down to talk about money, the alarm went off. The thinking brain went offline, and her body did what bodies do when the brain says run. It flooded with stress hormones, her stomach churned, she started to sweat, and every instinct she had said, get out of this situation, get out of this room right now, even though her finances were fine. The facts did not matter because the amygdala does not care about facts. It cares about survival. Now, here is why this matters so much for you. Because if your brain is in survival mode, you cannot out-strategy it. You cannot spreadsheet your way through it. You cannot discipline your way through it because the part of your brain that handles discipline is offline. So before you even try to fix your money, you have to learn how to regulate your nervous system in those moments. Here's a simple way to start. And I want you to actually use this. The next time you feel that resistance, that urge to avoid, to shut down, to not open the app or not have the conversation, don't push through it immediately. Pause, take one breath in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale slowly for 6. Do that 3 times. What you're doing in that moment is signaling to your brain, I am safe. And when your brain feels safe, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, comes back online. That is the doorway to changing your behavior. That's the moment where change actually becomes possible. And here's the thing. Your amygdala cannot always tell the difference between a real physical threat and an emotional one. Between a lion chasing you and a credit card statement in your inbox. Between genuine danger and the discomfort of looking at what you spent last month. To your amygdala, threat is a threat. And if your little prince decided early on that money equals pain, your amygdala is going to fire every time money comes up, and it's going to send you straight down that old neural pathway before you even realize that it's happening. This is why you can know exactly what you should be doing financially and still not do it. This is why incredibly smart, capable people make what look like completely irrational financial decisions over and over again. It's not a willpower problem. It's not an intelligence problem. It's a brain doing precisely what it was designed to do, protecting you from what it learned to perceive as dangerous, even when that danger is no longer real. And this right here is why just giving someone more financial information does not fix the problem. If the amygdala is running the show and the old pathways say money equals danger, it does not matter how good your budget is. That thinking brain is offline. You have to work at the level of the belief, not just the behavior. Your brain is drowning in information and it has a bouncer. Remember, At any given moment, your brain is being bombarded with roughly 11 million bits of information per second, and your conscious mind can process somewhere around 40 to 50 of those bits. 11 million in, 40 or 50 making it through. So what happens to everything else? Well, after your amygdala determines something is not an immediate threat, your brain filters it automatically, constantly, without your conscious input. Everything gets sorted into one of two buckets: not interesting or interesting enough to pay attention to. And the things that do not make that second cut, they essentially do not exist to you. You literally do not see them, hear them, or register them, even when they are right in front of your face. This is why two people can have the exact same experience and walk away with two completely different versions of what happened. Both can be entirely accurate, because what each person noticed and remembered depended less on what the experience actually contained and more on what their brain was already programmed to find important. The system responsible for making that call is called the Reticular Activating System, or the RAS. Think of your RAS as the bouncer at the door of your conscious awareness. It decides what gets in and what gets filtered out. And here's the critical piece. Your RAS takes its instructions directly from your dominant thoughts, beliefs, and focus. You have experienced this firsthand, I promise you. Have you ever decided that you wanted to buy a specific car, let's say a red Jeep, and suddenly red Jeeps are everywhere? They were always there. Your RAS was just filtering them out because your brain did not consider them important. The moment that you told your brain this mattered, it started letting that information through. So let me connect this directly to manifestation, because this is the part a lot of people miss. When you say, I want to be wealthy, but your dominant belief is that's not for someone like me, your RAS filters out everything that could make your wealth happen. Opportunities don't register, ideas don't land, connections don't get noticed. It's not that they're not there. Your brain's not letting them in. But when you begin to shift that belief even slightly, your RAS updates that filter, and suddenly you notice the conversation, you see the opportunity, you consider the idea. Not because the world changed, but because your brain changed what it was willing to see. That's manifestation in action. Not attracting something from thin air, seeing and acting what was already available to you. Now apply that to your financial life. Let's look at another example, a very common one. If your dominant belief is there is never enough money, your RAS is going to find evidence of that everywhere. Every unexpected expense, every price increase, every time something costs more than you expected it to, your brain will faithfully collect all of that evidence and present it to you constantly, because that's what it's been told to look for. Any opportunity to save money? Missed. Any chance to earn more money? Overlooked. This was my client's reality. Her dominant belief, formed in childhood, reinforced by decades of avoidance, was that money was something to fear, something dangerous, something to stay away from. And so her brain, being incredibly efficient, filtered her entire financial world through that lens. Opportunities that might have excited someone else did not even register for her. Evidence that she was actually doing okay financially, which was right there in her statements, could not break through the filter. Her RAS was not looking for it. But here's the flip side. This is exactly where manifestation starts to make logical, scientific sense. When she began to shift that dominant belief, when she started doing the work of seeing money as something she could understand, something she could learn, something that was not inherently dangerous, her RAS started updating its filter. Opportunities she would have missed before started surfacing. Financial conversations that would have sent her running started feeling manageable. The investment club she eventually joined, the idea of that would have been completely invisible to her before. Her RAS would have completely filtered that out. But with a new belief running the program, it made it through. The same world, the same circumstances, a completely different filter, and completely different results. This is the real mechanism behind the idea that you attract what you focus on. It's not mystical. It's your RAS doing its job. When you consistently think about growth, possibility, and abundance, your brain starts surfacing opportunities, connections, and ideas that were always there. It was just filtering them out because you had not told it that they mattered. This is not magical thinking. This is literally how your brain works. So we talked about the Little Prince and how your early experiences built neural pathways before you were old enough to question them. We talked about the amygdala hijacking your rational brain every time money feels like a threat. We talked about your RAS filtering your entire reality based on your dominant beliefs. And I know that is a lot to sit with. It might even feel heavy, like, wow, my brain has been running this show the whole time, and I had absolutely no idea. But here's the part I have been waiting to get to, because this is the part that changes everything. Your brain is not fixed. It is not hardwired. Anything learned can be unlearned. The pathways that got built, no matter when they were built, no matter how deep they run, can be changed. New ones can be created, old ones can be weakened, and eventually abandoned. This is called neuroplasticity, and it is one of the most remarkable and most hopeful things I have ever learned about being a human being. For a long time, scientists believed that the brain was essentially set by early adulthood, that what you had at that point was what you had for life. We now know it's simply not true. Your brain has the ability to reorganize itself, form new connections, and build entirely new pathways throughout your entire life. You are never too old. You are never too far gone. You are never too stuck. My client proved that. A woman so conditioned by fear that she could not sit in a room with a bank statement without her body going to full alarm mode. She rewired it. Not overnight and not without effort, but she did it. And it changed everything for her. Here's how it actually works, and how it connects directly back to our thoughts, beliefs, actions, results cycle. It starts with a thought. One single, conscious, deliberate thought that runs counter to the old pattern. One thought alone does not build a new pathway, but it is the beginning. When you repeat that thought consistently, when you choose it over and over again, even when it does not feel fully true yet, it starts to become a belief. Not something you think, something you feel. Something that starts to seem possible. For my client, that first thought was something like, maybe money is not actually dangerous. Maybe I can learn this. It did not feel true at all for her at first. Her amygdala still fired, her stomach still churned, but she kept choosing it. And slowly that thought started wearing a new groove. When something starts to feel possible, it changes the way you talk about yourself, about money, about what your future looks like. Your language shifts. And this matters far more than most people realize, because every word you use, both out loud and in your own head, is either reinforcing an old pathway or laying down a new one. Every time you say, I'm terrible with money, you are deepening an old groove. Every time you catch yourself and replace it with, I am learning to manage my money well, even when it does not feel fully true yet, you are building a new track. And as that belief starts to take hold, your RAS updates its filter. It starts surfacing evidence that supports this new story. Opportunities that you would have missed before. Conversations that you would have avoided. Ideas that you would have dismissed or not even considered for somebody like you. They start making it through because your brain has now been told that they matter. And then that shift in thought, belief, and language starts to inspire action. Small actions at first, maybe you open your bank account and actually look at it. Maybe you have a money conversation you would have previously run from. Maybe you show up to something you would have talked yourself out of before. Those actions create new experiences. New experiences create new evidence. New evidence reinforces the new belief, which generates more action, which creates more evidence, thought, belief, language, action, habit. That's the full cycle. And once it gets going, once you have enough repetition that the new pathway starts to feel more natural than the old one, it becomes who you are. It becomes automatic, your new default. And that right there is what manifestation actually is in practice. It is not sitting quietly wishing for things to appear. It is intentionally working this cycle, deliberately choosing different thoughts, building different beliefs, letting those beliefs update your filter, taking the actions that those beliefs make possible, and repeating that consistently, patiently, over time, until it becomes who you are. My client didn't earn more money or suddenly find a secret investment strategy or stumble into a windfall. She shifted her mindset. She worked the cycle. And her brain, that remarkably efficient, pattern-seeking, evidence-collecting machine, started finding an entirely different world for her to live in. One where she belonged in, an investment club. One where she would sit across from her financial statement and feel curious instead of terrified. One where wealth felt possible for someone like her. It's not a miracle. It's neuroscience. It's neuroplasticity in action. That is the thoughts, beliefs, actions, results cycle, doing exactly what it is designed to do when you do the work of running in the right direction. So here's what I want you to sit with after this today. Your financial life is not just a math problem. It's not simply a matter of learning the right strategies or following the right steps. It is deeply, fundamentally connected to what your brain learned to believe about money, probably before you were old enough to tie your shoes. And those beliefs have been quietly running your decisions, filtering your reality, and shaping your choices ever since. That is not your fault. But here's the thing, it is your responsibility. And the most powerful thing you can do right now before you touch a single spreadsheet or open a single investment account is to start getting honest about the story your brain has been telling. So here's your one thing to consider for this week, just one. The next time you notice yourself avoiding something financial, putting off that phone call, ignoring that statement, talking yourself out of something before you even try, I want you to pause just for a second and ask yourself, whose voice is that? How old is that belief? And is it actually true? Or is it just a groove that got worn so deep you stopped questioning it? You don't have to fix anything yet. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just notice it. Get curious instead of being critical. Because awareness, real, honest awareness, is where every single transformation begins. My client's journey started with one conversation where someone finally explained to her why she felt the way that she did. That was it. That was the crack in the door, and everything else followed from there. Your crack in the door might be today. I hope to see you again next week.